5.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. You are live, you are live.
Good afternoon, everybody. What a spectacular start to the afternoon. There's a herd of elephants off behind this huge bull who's frustrated by the heat. He's been in the pan with Peter. He's been throwing mud all over himself. He's got great tusks and he's just hanging his trunk over them because he feels frustrated. He looks hot. He looks bothered. There's no water here for him to drink. Peter has not moved an inch while the elephant's been in the pan. Now, in case you have just stumbled across this website, you are on a live safari here from the northeast corner of South Africa, the great Kruger National Park, iconic national park of the world. We're on the western fringes of it. There's a drought in full flow at the moment. And the elephants are looking for... Excuse me. The elephants are looking for water, they're looking for mud, they're looking for kulth. If you want to talk to us, please do so. Hashtag SafariLIVE. If you're tweeting like the oxpeckers, you can hear to the right-hand side of us, or questions at WildEarth.tv if you want to talk to us on the email. And my name is James Hendry. Brian is on camera today, all 6'4" of him. We'll show you his thumb later. He's just concentrating on filming the elephant. On the other vehicle is Jamie. She's being filmed by Tebbs. All of us are feeling quite hot and bothered. I think it's about 38 to 39 degrees Celsius, which is pushing 100 degrees Fahrenheit. So it is very warm indeed out here. There's no rain. Now, I haven't seen a cloud for 4 days. But all is very peaceful. And I was just saying, the smell over here is one of fertilizer. There's a whole lot of urea all over the ground because the buffalo have been sat here for so long. Now, Paul, you reckon that Peter's going to have a big problem here if they don't turn on the pump soon to feed this pan. He might, but he could always move. The only reason he's here is because it's convenient. So he's not here because this is the last water in the world. So he could easily go down to the Sand River, find himself a little patch there. He could go to the Sabi River. They wouldn't move that fast. That's about 30 k's away, but they could move that far. He could go to Sydney's Dam. He may be chased out of there, but he's only here because there happens to be water here. And I wouldn't be too surprised if the reason they're not pumping this pan is to get rid of him. He was walking around the camp yesterday. A hippopotamus in the hot, out of the water, around the camp is pretty dangerous. So I don't think that the management of Djuma would be too terribly sad were he to wander off and find some cleaner water somewhere around the Sand River. Some amazing stuff going on here. We could have started this afternoon or sunset safari every single day over here because there are always some buffalo with their oxpeckers. This one is particularly having a hard time because there are oxpeckers eating out of a wound on his shoulder. We've seen him before a few times. He doesn't seem to be particularly perturbed by the oxpeckers that are now virtually digging an enormous canyon in the top of his shoulder. And those are red-billed oxpeckers, obviously, because they are red-billed. And there is often a yellow-billed oxpecker that lurks around these parts. And then if we're off to the front, they're also a quite common resident here at this time of the day. There is a little flock of guinea fowl, helmeted guinea fowl, with their blue heads and ridiculous little helmets, which seem to serve no purpose at all. And then the enormous elephant bull. Now, Susan, you make quite a good point. You say you've read that the Kruger National Park has asked landowners on the fringes to not pump their pans, to try and make things a little bit more natural. I didn't know that. It wouldn't surprise me. I know that the Kruger Park itself is closing a lot of the artificial water points. They have been doing that for a number of years now because they've realized that providing artificial water supports a number of species, but also, to the detriment of other species. So it wouldn't surprise me in the slightest to find that they had asked the private landowners out here to close waterholes. Obviously, there's no obligation to them to do that. But what it will do if they don't in the Sabi Sands, for example, and I seriously doubt whether most of them will. I mean, you can see the size of this dam in front of the pan here, and you will find that, this is one of many, many similar-sized dams throughout the Sabi Sands. To get rid of them would be extremely costly indeed. And so what you'll find is that although this one is obviously not carrying water, I think very few are going to close their water points, and that's going to result in an enormous influx of elephants as the drought progresses. Here come the little guinea fowl. They're thinking about coming to have a drink. And just as we talk about the drought, I made quite strong mention this morning of the fact that we as human beings tend to be very much focused on, sort of timing that is the same length as our own lifetime. We have a very short lifespan in comparison with the cycles that go on in ecology. And so we pump water and thinking that we're doing good and providing for the animals that might want to have some water. But in actual fact, if we were to just let things be, and although there would be a die-off, it would be unpleasant to watch, we have to accept sometimes that that's just the way it is. And we might not ever see it verdant and green again because that's just, that's the length of our lifespan. But at the same time, this place has been here for millennia before we got here, and it will be here for millennia after we go. Assuming the Earth isn't obliterated by an asteroid, of course. Yeah, another young bull, and this big bull has been very tolerant. He's just watched this young one come up, and he's just letting him throw mud on himself. Which is wonderful. The big bulls often take on a very important role in the social structure of the elephants. They become mentors to a number of askaris, what we call them. So this young bull might eventually be an askari for this old boy. He's a magnificent fellow. The big bull is watching us, definitely. I mean, he's not simply standing there for the sake of it. I think he's feeling frustrated by the heat. He doesn't want to leave this mud wallow. I think he's probably quite thirsty. And if he wants water, he'll probably go off towards the Gallagher waterhole. But he is watching us, so we in turn will watch him quite carefully. You do not see that every day. Often said to the little ones, I've never seen a big bull like that do that. You see it flopping his nose over his tusks. It's heavy, it's hot. And if he doesn't have to carry it, he won't. Of course, many elephants don't have tusks that are able to take the weight of his, or certainly not shaped or large enough to take the trunk. He just looks frustrated, doesn't he? So I'm glad I don't have to suck this mud into my nose and then spray it on myself. And if we saw the young bull on his own, without this huge fellow with us. You would think he was pretty big. He's definitely much bigger than Peter. Peter's about 2.5 tons. The young bull, I would say, is pushing 3 to 3.5, maybe 3. And then the big one, probably pushing 6. So it just gives you an idea of the size difference there, you can see. And I promise you that little one would look a whole lot bigger were it not for this enormous frustrated trunk arrestor. Oh, the guineas are coming in. He was slightly shocked by life, I feel. And the elephant is now looking at them with malice. The little one, I mean. Pat, do you want to know if these ellies are likely to move out of this area if the drought continues? Pat, it depends entirely on where else there will be water. Now, remember, this is a countrywide drought we're experiencing. All parts of the country, except maybe the highveld around Johannesburg and Pretoria, are experiencing a drought. And so, I'm not sure where they'd go. They might certainly move down to the permanent rivers, to the Sabi River. To the south, they may go north to the Letaba River or the Olifants River, both of which will carry, well, the Letaba, I believe, is almost dry. The Olifants may carry water still. So that's where they could go. But in terms of, other properties other than the rivers, no, I don't think there's anywhere for them to go, Pat. The smell here is quite astonishing. It really does. The pan itself smells like a sort of a vegetarian sewer, if you like. There's lots and lots of rotting grass in there, mainly from Peter's bowels and also from the bowels of all the buffalo. And as I say, the buffalo and elephants have gone to the loo, relieved themselves, urinated and defecated all over this area, and it smells, any water that we get here is going to result in a great flush of grass, because the fertilizer here is quite stunning. Here comes another elephant from the front, and the one that we've just seen looks like he's not very happy to see the approach. And just to keep those of you who are interested in the loop, the 5 Birmingham boys are now on Hoffman's, which is to the south of us. With any luck, they'll come north again, who knows? And then I did read a wonderful post from the blog at Londolozi today, and the Majingalani males, 3 of them, have been fighting with our old mates, the Matimbas, Ginger and Hairy Belly. And the Ginger and Hairy Belly, despite the fact that they absconded post-haste in the face of the attack from the Birmingham boys, who are sometimes called the Brummies, and they seem to be standing up for themselves at Londolozi rather well. They chased the Majingalani off, the Majingalans chased them back, and there seems to be a bit of a stalemate, but, far from just running away like they did before, they seem to be making a stand, which is quite nice, and I'm sure many of you who have enjoyed the wonderful sightings of those brilliant lions will be happy to know that they're having a good time down south on the Sand River. Right, another elephant approaching. We've just turned the VR rig on, so if I start talking to you as if I'm giving some kind of a performance, then please don't be alarmed. Especially if I start pointing out left and right. Now, Lynn, I'm going to tell you how the VR is going. The VR is going okay. We've got some very nice footage of us driving along, and Brian, they're both very, very set to the left-hand side there. Brian has managed to download an app onto his phone, which means we can actually see the VR stuff. So you hold the phone, you watch one angle, then you move the phone, you turn around, and you see a completely different angle in the same video. It's quite astonishing. Well done, Brian. I'm just going to tell our VR guests what's going on here. So to the left-hand side, you've got an enormous bull, probably about 6 tons. There in front to the left, a younger bull, probably sitting at about 3.5 to 4 tons. He would look much more enormous, much more impressive, were it not for the fact that there is that big old boy sitting on the far left. Then, in the pan here, in this mud wallow, is a hippopotamus, just slowly opening and shutting his eyes, as you can see. And he is not moving for love nor money because it's very hot and he doesn't want to be out in the sun. Buffalo to the front, guinea fowl on the ground to the front as well, more buffalo to the right-hand side. And eating the buffalo, of course, here are some oxpeckers. While they're not going to kill him, they do seem to be eating a fairly substantial hole into his side, probably initially made by some ticks. Oh, some action here. Look, this big bull is taking exception to the young bull. He's tolerated one bull already coming to have a drink. Now he's not happy with this one. The little one's saying, "Leave me alone, you old codger, you grumpy old codger." And this big bull, I think he's got a very stretched trunk, and I think it's probably a result of the fact that his tusks are so big. I think you'll find that the muscles in the trunk have become quite lax because he rests it so much on the top of those tusks. And now he's resting it on the ground. You can see the other bull, who's, proportionately the same size, holds his off the ground, and the muscles in that trunk are very concertina-like, so they can kind of pull them up. It's not a question that he has to fold it. That trunk is very long. You see how the big bull has to hold it off the ground. It's interesting. Now they're communicating with each other all the time. Who knows what was said between them? Look at that. The young bull knew that he wasn't in trouble there. He read the body language. I'm sure there was some kind of other sound made as the big bull moves off to the front. The young bull's coming back to the left to throw some more mud on himself. It's amazing stuff. Up above us, of course, a great cloudless summer sky. The sky is slightly bleached by the heat, I feel. It's not quite as deep blue as it might be were there a storm building to the west. There's no storm building to the west. Now, were we to come across here and just see that bull off there to the left, and he had been on his own here without that massive thing that's now moving off down the road in front of us, I think you'd have been twice as impressed by his size as you possibly are now. Give it a sink, Brian. Sorry, beefies. Sorry about that, everybody. I just had to sync the virtual reality rig. Buffalo took exception. Probably time he got up anyway. Charlie, a very good question, and I'm not really sure how to answer it as that buffalo makes his effort to help with the fertilization of the area. He's just finishing off there. Well done. Charlie, you say you don't know how that wound will ever heal with the birds eating from it all the time. Charlie, it's a good question. And, I mean, you say he needs a bird swatter. He could, if he shakes his body enough, they'll move off. You know, they don't sort of hang on there if he shakes his body around and turns his head towards there. I suspect they're playing a role in keeping it clean, you know. That said, that hole has been open for some time. Brian, you've seen that hole before you went on leave even. You probably saw that buffalo with his hole. So, yeah, I mean, it's probably not in a particularly difficult place. It's obviously not that sore because he's not, you know, he's not bugged by it. You know that if you've got a dog or a cat that's sore, they will constantly turn towards it or try and lick it or, you know, try and get away from the pain, which is precisely not what this buffalo is doing. So, yeah, Charlie, I don't know. Time will tell. I think they do play a role in keeping it clean. I also think that they do keep it open on purpose so that it gives them some stuff to eat. Now, just if we go down towards those guineas, if you don't mind there, Brian, they're digging about in some buffalo dung, and I suspect what you'll find is that there are a whole lot of termites, maybe in the harvested termites that are trying to bury the dung. There might be a few other insects and other invertebrates making a home in the dung there, and that's what the guineas are trying to get at. They predominantly, I suppose, would be seed eaters, but they'll absolutely eat insects and termites, as will many of the birds. And you can see there's a little ground bird party going on there now. Some blacksmith lapwings, some starlings, greater blue-eared or Cape glossy. It's impossible to tell from this angle. And obviously the little guineas and one or two oxpeckers. Very pretty little scene. There goes the buff. I'm not sure what he's going off to do. Gilly in Wisconsin, where I have no doubt it is a lot colder than it is here. I have an aunt who lives in Wisconsin, believe it or not. Haven't seen her for a long time. And I think she still lives in Wisconsin. You want to know if it's true that elephants keep growing forever? Well, until they die, of course. Yes, Gilly, that's absolutely true, and so do the cows. They don't stop growing either. They obviously slow down a bit, but the older an elephant is, the bigger he will be, which is an amazing thing when you think about most other species. Let's see if this young chap wants to come and say hello to us. I hope he does. It's much less threatening when a young bull like this comes to say hello than a giant like the one we saw. Right. We'll sit here for a few more minutes, see what this elephant does. In the meanwhile, let's head across to Jamie. She, of course, is driving about, trying to find things in the heat, and she will tell us more about that now, and I'll see you shortly.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Sounds like you were having a wonderful time with Mr. Henry and his wonderful elephants. Tebs, can you do me a favor? Can you zoom in on the knot in that leadwood tree? The big... Yeah, somewhat... Yes, perfect. Thank you. I just wanted to have a look at that. Just before we went live, I heard the begging sounds of chicks and a yellow-billed hornbill flew away from this tree. And somewhere in here, possibly in that little hollow, it's got a nest. You could hear the little chicks cheeping to mom or dad, probably dad, to come and feed it. And for new viewers, the way that yellow-billed hornbills work is the mother goes into the nest, she loses her primary and her secondary flight feathers and blocks up the entrance to the hole with mud so that there's only a tiny little hole peeking through, and the male then feeds her for the early stages of the eggs incubating and then hatching. And then once the chicks have started to fledge, then she breaks out of the nest and her flight feathers grow back, and she then starts helping the male with feeding their brood. So somewhere in this beautiful old leadwood, there is a hornbill nest. And I wish them all of the best of luck for times to come. I'm not sure whether James has touched on it. Somehow I think he might have. But today is absolutely scorching. I went out in a soaking wet shirt and soaked my cap as well, and I'm almost completely dry already. So it really is unbelievably warm. My experience in the bush at this time of year is that yes, it's hot, but it always carries the promise of an incoming thunderstorm to break the tension of the day and just cool everything down overnight. And unfortunately this year it just hasn't happened. And at the moment, even driving, if I lift my hands off the steering wheel for too long, bits, or if I change position, bits that I haven't been touching have become superheated and warm. I don't envy James and his Metal Gear selector on Jigger. Who is watching in Michigan, Stella, to know whether or not the drought is countrywide or whether it's restricted to the Sabi Sands, which is a very salient question. It is throughout the country, everywhere in South Africa at the moment, particularly Gauteng and the northwest, Limpopo and Mpumalanga, and we sit right on the sort of border of Mpumalanga and Limpopo. Those are the different provinces within South Africa. Everywhere is experiencing a serious heat wave and also a serious water shortage. Last time I went back to visit my parents in Johannesburg, there were all kinds of water restrictions in terms of watering gardens and washing cars and so on. So it is countrywide. I'm just going to go through this dip for a second. Yes, the drought is. That being said, a friend of mine is here visiting from a reserve closer towards the Drakensberg Mountains, and they've had fractionally more rain than we have had in the Sabi Sands here. It was enough to fill their dams for a while and just help to keep them from the brink of what we're experiencing now, which is essentially absolutely no water sources at all. They at least had their dams filled by a couple of big heavy rains. Now I can't remember off the top of my head. One of the viewers asked me a couple of days ago about whether or not the reserves closer to the Drakensberg Mountains that catch the rain and keep it there, whether they've experienced any kind of increase in bird population. And I think it might have been sacrosanct, I think. I'm not sure if you're watching. If you are, you can let me know. But I spoke to Emma about it, and she said, interestingly, the bird that they've seen a tremendous increase of, and I'm not sure whether it's because of this drought, but I have noticed far less nests of this particular bird. But she said they've seen an influx of weavers. So things like the southern masked weaver, the village weaver, red-headed weaver. They've seen far more nests than they ever have in the past. Now, I don't know whether or not that is a product of the drought being slightly more severe around the Sabi Sands and the greater Kruger area, but it is a really interesting point. So I did double check up on that. And I certainly haven't seen all that many weavers. On the subject of drought, we've got one or two water holes still with water, and James is still with stuff happening at the Djuma Dam. So let's pop back across there.
Well, we thought about going somewhere else, everyone, but then we decided that there was nice shade here, there were nice animals here. Out of the shade, it is beastly hot. And then the Nyala came, and one or two more starlings pitched up, and we thought, well, why don't we just sit here for a little bit longer? And there's a stunning Nyala cow I'm not sure what she thinks she's going to drink in this, what can only be described as cesspit of buffalo and hippo dung. But let's see. I think she's going to be sorely disappointed. They're definitely looking for something to drink, but you can see all the butterflies flying there. There's an African joker, not a joker, guinea fowl butterfly, sorry, and a monarch. I wonder if our friend Kurula isn't lurking in the bushes around here somewhere. The last time I spotted her, this is without Tebbs's aid, I mean, she was lurking in the bush, just watching the waterhole. I wonder if she isn't doing the same today. And there they go. Now you can see Peter, the mud drying on him, and I think you'll probably find that he'll turn over every so often to recover himself in mud. That mud is an excellent natural sunscreen, but it's also going to get quite hard and caked and absorb the heat where he's sitting, which will not be very nice at all for him. Now, those of you who were with us a few days ago will have seen me make a safari ken, and safari ken is now very Safari Ken is now beautifully hard. He's got very hard, so he's a solid fellow now. No, if you didn't see him, I'm sorry about that. He was a spectacular piece of artwork. Eric in Virginia Beach, a good question about the Drakensberg and whether the fact that we're having a drought is due to the fact that we're in the rain shadow of the mountains. Eric, we're absolutely in the rain shadow of the mountains. That is completely correct. And the annual rainfall, as you move away from the mountains to here, it decreases kind of almost by the meter as you move away from the mountains. It's incredible to see. But it's also very dry in the mountains. So yes, we're in the rain shadow, but in fact the entire country is gripped by the drought, and apparently it is an El Nino effect, which of course is that weather sort of system, the complexities of which are beyond my understanding at this point. But that's the El Nino effect, which is bringing the dry weather to the country at the moment, and indeed large parts of southern Africa. It's not only South Africa. And their prediction is that we're going to have a huge dumping of rain in February, and that rain will... There's a little go-away bird. I was so surprised that rain could well cause some sort of localized flooding. But by then, of course, the growth season will be over. A lot of these areas will be free. Oh, it's a hardy-dar. I saw the shadow of wings flying over, and I think a lot of the birds did. But it's not a predatory bird. It's just a big, loud, noisy one called a hardy-dar ibis. So Eric, just to conclude there, I don't think that there's anything to do with the rain shadow that this is particularly dry. Yes, certainly it's going to be drier than in the mountains, but the countrywide drought. Very nice question. Very astute of you, Eric, all the way from Virginia Beach. And I've been asked to do an impression of the hardy-dar call. I'm going to suggest that Brian and I do one. I will do... Brian's also from Johannesburg, so we're well versed with the hardy-dar. There we go. Wasn't that wonderful, Brian?
That was splendid.
We were amazing. Yeah, great. So there's a Nyala bull coming up to have a drink, and before we head off, there also seems to be a deeply surprised looking wildebeest on his way here from the right hand side, and they always look deeply surprised. He seems to be on his own. He's looking at us like he's never seen a vehicle before, despite the fact that he's probably seen 7,000 drive past him, and he gets a fright every time. So the Impala we were watching this morning, it's worth resharing the joke that Viam told, or the sort of quip he made when we were watching some Impala at Arathusa Dam, and those Impala, as they saw the vehicle arriving, they ran away. And I said, Viam, I mean, come on, they've seen thousands of vehicles, why are they still running? They know we're no threat. He said, James, Impala's got a brain like a politician. Very stupid. I thought that was a really nice way of putting it. Well done, Viam. And there go the elephants, same elephants, moving through the bush there. All right, I'm going to drag myself away from this dam, and while we move away, we might come back in a little while. Let's head across to Jeannie, see what she's doing, and I will catch up with you a little bit later.
Something I was always humorously told was that hardy-dar ibises make that noise because they're scared of heights. So whenever they fly, when they're flying, they're looking down and going, wah, wah, in sheer terror. And actually, I think that was a fairly good hardy-dar impression, considering my severe lack of skill in that department. Hello, Impala. Sitting in the shade, which is good, because I can turn my... No, don't go. I can sit in the shade too. Shame. I wonder if animals feel the discomfort of temperature changes and so on like we do. Of course, we know they feel hot. But I wonder if they are as self-aware of being uncomfortable. They must be. Finding the perfect shady spot there inside Torchwood. What other fantastic impressions can we do today? I think my favorite thing that I'm going to take away from today was young November, the hyena cub's call. Probably his first time calling, and it was one of the cutest things I've ever heard this morning. The little woo. It was absolutely breathtaking. Impala resting in the shade. I don't know where the rest of his herd is. I think he's wandered off on his own in search of a cool spot. Tebs and myself are slowly sweating our way up Cheetah Cut Line to see what we can find along the eastern boundary of Djuma. Just a quick update on the Birmingham boys. The Birmingham boys were last seen on Hoffman's, which, as many of our regular viewers will know, is the little corner property just south of Djuma's boundary, right in the southwestern corner. All 5 of them were around. And that actually gives the Talamati pride of the north and the Salati males of the north a little bit of a breather. They've spent a great deal of time just north of our boundary around some of the bigger Buffelshoek dams. Beyond that, we haven't heard much about the Nkuhumas for a very, very long time. They've probably most likely moved towards Kruger. And just like the rest of the animals around here, out looking for access to any kind of water, or at least less the water and more the fact that they're out looking for prey to hunt. A lot of the prey animals are moving further and further afield in their search for moisture. plays out and what it means not just for the prey animals but also for the predators. At the moment, the prey is becoming more and more concentrated around water sources. So, having been listening to the Game Drive channel every day, listening to the Talamati pride's progress. Now, Talamati were originally under the control, as far as we knew, of the Matimba males back before the Birmingham boys took over. That control has shifted to the Salati males of the north. It seems as though, because they've been spending a lot of time with them. And essentially they're killing a buffalo or a zebra once every 3 or so days. So they're taking absolute advantage of the current drought conditions. And as we've said before, the predators will most likely definitely profit from this current drought situation. Chatting a bit about the lions of this area, Tians, who's watching in Margate, I'm sure this makes for really good beach weather. Tians would like to know whether or not we think the Birmingham boys are offspring of the Mapocho males. And no, to the best of our knowledge, with pretty much a 99% certainty, we can say that they are not. They come from a farm that is known as Birmingham, or around that sort of general area, which is quite far out. It's outside of the Sabi Sands. It is open to the Sabi Sands, but it is outside of it, and it's up towards, it's along the Auckland Road. And they would have had to, in the time that they've moved through to come and conduct this pride takeover around Djuma and the surrounding areas, they moved on probably close to 40 kilometers from around the Birmingham farm through Manuleti and then down through Buffelshoek and then into Djuma. So they've covered an enormous distance, and although the Mapopos had an absolutely enormous territory during their prime, which would have put them at the right sort of rough age to have been the parents of the Birmingham boys, given that the Birminghams are around 4 to 5 years old now. But from what I understand, the Mapopos were more centralized around the Sabi Sands, including the Djuma area, but a little bit far to have fathered the Birmingham boys. And there's a lot of different information depending on where you read up a little bit about the history of the Birmingham pride. It was originally an absolutely enormous pride and still exists to this day. As to which males were in control of that particular pride when the Birmingham boys would have been fathered, I'm not entirely sure. Possibly some of our more regular viewers might know. I think it would be difficult to say with any kind of absolute certainty. And certain records actually seem to indicate in a certain sense of irony that the Matimba males, the original coalition, and probably the northern split, the northern pair that lives up more in the northern sections around Manuleti, reports seem to indicate that they might have been responsible for pushing the Birmingham boys out of the Birmingham pride when they reached that adolescent age that male lions usually go through. Sorry, no, obviously they go through an adolescent age. I mean, usually the stage at which they've been pushed out of their pride. Hasn't seemed to have worked in quite the way it should have with Junior, who is the pretty much almost adult male lion within the Nkuhuma pride, who should have left quite a long time ago, but I think because of the fractured and disjointed nature of what's happened around here, I think that Junior has actually found it fairly safe to stick with the Nkuhumas, because the Nkuhumas have just been on a constant roll of avoiding the Birmingham boys unless one of the females comes into estrus. And as a result, Junior's actually extended his tenure with his pride. No, I'm not sure who the Birmingham's fathers are, to be honest, but I don't think it was the Mapopos. his reluctance to leave is also fueled by the fact that he is on his own. He doesn't have any siblings to join up with. And Michael, you were wondering, or you were saying you would love for him to be able to find a companion. You were wondering whether it's likely that he could join up and form a coalition with an unrelated or one or more unrelated males. And lions do that. In coalitions, they're not nearly as picky as something like a male cheetah coalition that is almost always brothers, if maybe cousins, but even then, it's quite a strict relationship. Lions are not as strict, and they're quite happy to form coalitions with lions of a similar age that they are not related to. And the reason behind that is male coalitions within lions, a lot of the time, most of the males will have mating rights at some point. If they manage, they've obviously got the advantage in numbers. The more members of the coalition you have, the better. And if they do manage to establish a territory and become dominant, then they will have a sort of a shared access to females. They might scrap about it for a while, but they still should all have an opportunity to pass on their genetics. So it makes joining up with another coalition member totally worth their while. Whereas with cheetah, the brothers tend to have quite a strict hierarchy. So only really the dominant male will have the majority of access to females. So yes, I think there is a chance. Junior has to get lucky. He has to find a young male of a fairly similar age to join up with in a fairly similar situation, because he might struggle to join up with an already established coalition. But as long as he plays his cards right and acts submissive, we've seen him before lie 100 meters away from the Birmingham boys themselves. So he's obviously not a stupid lion. He knows how to, or he's a survivor. Hopefully that will be able to translate into finding another buddy to help keep him alive. Wondering a little bit about how one gets to go about doing a job as wonderful as this. You want to know how you become a wild safari guide, in your words, which I like. It's probably one of the better terms I've heard for the job that we do. Probably the official term, if you're looking for it, is a field guide. About 20 years ago, the job that we do is generally referred to as game ranging by South Africans, but that's actually more of a different field. That's more devoted towards things like actually running and managing a reserve, rather than working with showing people around and teaching them a little bit about the animals around here. And Sandy, in answer to your question, it takes a certain amount of time and training. You can't really simply go out and do it. You've got to spend a certain amount of time learning the basic information. You've got to put in the work involved to learn that. And then afterwards, you can usually find several well-placed either training institutions or lodges that are willing to take on interns. And I know quite a few of us have started out pretty much as unpaid labor whilst training before going on to then accept paid positions. And you can start, there's a lot of different ways, and you'll find with all of the presenters, we've all followed very different paths. In fact, before I started working here, I was working almost purely as a research guide with volunteers and with students every level from undergraduate to PhD level, which is also a really interesting way to learn, because you spend less time trying to race after the big five and a lot of time sitting for hours on end observing animal behavior. But absolutely anybody, in from my experience, can become a field guide, as long as it is a physically demanding job, and you definitely have to be a morning person. If you know that you're not going to be a happy person at 4 o'clock in the morning, it might not be the job for you. It's amazing what you can get used to. And it's also amazing hearing the different stories of various guys that I know. Hello? There's a roadblock. There's a tree. It is very much in my way. Hello, tree. Might have to be doing a couple of 20-point turns to get around this one. Obviously that elephant decided that he absolutely had to have the top parts of this bush willow. There we go. That was not nearly as difficult as I thought it was going to be, apart from nearly being speared by the thorn tree that was waiting on the other side. I'm making my way towards Buffelshoek Dam, and while I do that, let's catch up with James Hendry and find out what he's been up to.
Right, everybody. Well, we've come to Arathusa. This is a good thing because the wild dogs have been found. We are on standby for the sighting, which means that we can't go there straight away. So we're going to wind our way gently along and see what we can find on our way there. With any luck, we'll be able to see them. Interestingly, down in the south of the Sabi Sands, 2 more packs of dogs were found. It seems to be that there's some conflict over land in this area at the moment. To have 3 or 4 different packs of dogs in one area is bizarre. Anyway, might have something to do with the drought, I'm not sure. You can see it's still very dry, and I know that we're banging on about this, but it is important. If you look at the grass on the side, still leaves on the trees, they're looking rather wilted and sad, and in between the trees, just not much for anything to eat. And they also made mention of the fact that this is probably a very pleasant time for predators like the dogs, and some of the animals will be losing condition, which makes it easier for them to be caught by the dogs. It's also clear, so I mean, if you look through the bush here, you can see that it's pretty clear, and if you're a coursing hunter like a wild dog, it's pretty good conditions for you to hunt in. I know that this can be a little irritating, but I do need to keep contact with what's going on around the dogs. That's of course how we say dogs now at WildEarth, because of a sighting. When I saw dogs, and I became overwhelmed with excitement, and I said, dogs. Live. Not by fire. Stand by. I'm on Norththorn clearance. Absolutely no problem at all. Copy, no rush. Right. Oh. You see what I see, Brian?
Okay.
Lurking on the side of the road is a little duiker. He does not want to see any dogs. Nor clearly does he want to see us. It's a little female duiker. Sheltering herself from the sun and the shade. Let's keep going, Brian. That a gentle northerly breeze brought on by our movement to the north is very refreshing. Right, I'm losing comms here. I think there was a link to Jamie at Buffelshoek Dam. Let's head across there. We'll keep making our way slowly towards the dogs.
Buffelshoek Dam is one somewhat nervous warthog that has gone dashing past. What on earth is lying in the dam? Let's have a look there, Tibbs. Oh, an angry elephant shouting somewhere. That looks very much... Sure. Very angry elephant. But that looks very much like some kind of animal corpse, unless I'm completely imagining it. I'm trying to have a look through my binoculars. I think it's a hippo. It might not be dead. This angle, we might have to go and loop around to have a look. It is likely that it is, though. Sure. This could be a very, very sad moment. And a very solid example of what is happening to the animals out here. It's definitely an animal. And it's almost certainly a hippo. Very difficult to tell. My first thought was actually buffalo. I thought maybe it was a buffalo that had got stuck. Or is it just the way that the mud is piled? I'll have to go have a... So something twitched there, so it is alive, whatever it is. It's a hippo. It's not a very happy hippo, though. If it is alive, it probably is not going to be for long. The animals are desperately looking for access to water. It probably came around looking and discovered itself quite stranded quite far away from any of the other dams at some point last night. And as the day started to get too hot for it, sought refuge in the mud. I'm going to go down this hill very slowly. There's some very angry elephants in front of me. So I might stop and have a look at them on the way. Hello, Ellies. Hi, guys. Drama was coming from. All right. It's okay, little Ellie. Some things upset you guys terribly. And now that we're with an elephant, Lorraine, you were wondering whether mud could ever dry up in their trunks and block them up. And the answer is no, not really. There's enough moisture in the mucous membranes of the trunk itself to keep that from happening. And also they're quite good at expelling. Much in the same way we have nose hairs that operate really well in catching dust particles and dirt particles and transporting them out. Elephants' trunks work in a similar way. So as far as I know, unless the elephant itself is really stuck in mud, which is not what I assume you're talking about, then no, they don't get mud stuck up their trunks. or blocked up in any way. You can see now she's busy having a bit of a dirt bath. Oh yes, okay, I'm sorry. I know that you guys are very cross at the moment. All of the animals are quite severely under pressure, and it is making them slightly more, what does the word be? I suppose skittish is probably the best term. So we'll give this little Ellie plenty of space, this little female. And they've obviously come down to Buffelshoek Dam. You're probably looking for a drink and discovered that actually there's absolutely no water available for them. But at the moment, this little Ellie is blocking my access to whatever's lying in the dam. So I know that you're all very interested to see what it is and to see if it's okay, but it might just have to wait until the elephant herd moves off. That looked like a direct shot straight to the eye there, in that trunk full of sand. There's nothing better than a quick dust bath. That nice girl. She has been in the mud. She's got a couple of wet patches around her. Look at how incredibly versatile that trunk is. So clever the way that she manages to wrap it around the sand and then throw it over the top of her body. And it works as an anti-parasite layer, as well as to help cool down, almost like an extra barrier against the sun. And this is probably part of the herd that's responsible for our earlier roadblock, making their way towards Buffelshoek in the hope that there'd be water there. No such luck, unfortunately. Quite an impressive set of tusks for an elephant that size. Straight and symmetrical. Building up a bit of momentum with the trunk there. You can see the rest of the herd moving in the background. And her ears working overtime to help keep her cool. Sure, she's found the perfect spot, hey Tebs? In the shade. And that typical elephant posture, rocking back on her ankle. Much like we would sit on one hip or lean on one hip when we stand. And she's giving every indication to us that we definitely will upset her if we go any closer. And at this age, she's not dangerous to us, but we are in their space and they are stressed out at this time. It's worth giving them plenty of space. Oh, wonderful dust bath. Did you see the way there that she's using her foot to dislodge the dirt and the dust, the top layer of soil, before she grabs it with her trunk and throws it over her? I think she's having a wonderful time. And that's what's so amazing about an elephant's trunk. It's all the different purposes it can be used for. Oh, quick head shake, loosen up the dust that was piling up around her ears. It's all right, little one. And it's used for everything from caressing another elephant to grabbing dust and dirt and mud and throwing it around, pulling down trees, plucking leaves. The most versatile of limbs, if you could call it a limb. I'm parked Rusty on a rather uncomfortable hill, so bear with me if we rock for just a moment. It's not Tebs' fault. Just letting the gears take the weight of the car. So at least they have managed to have some access to cool mud. imagine they must be fairly disappointed. What was that there? I think that was mucus from her nose that she just splashed up her forehead. Can't have been water from anywhere else. A liberal coating of elephant mucus. Perfectly down the center of her forehead.
Andrew. The rest of Pacific, stand by 3 available.
She's absolutely loving this dust bath. It's blowing air at the soil for getting the trunk full that she's looking for. Oh dear, I've made a terrible, terrible error while we've been sitting here. I crushed a Mapani bee by mistake. It was sitting on my neck and I scratched my neck. And I scratched one of the little, almost fly-like creatures that are currently swarming around Tebs and myself looking for moisture. The problem with that is that when you do that to one, oh shame, she got dirt in her eye. Then they release a pheromone that attracts the rest of them. So I think I'm going to be covered in Mapani bees very shortly. Pamela, I agree with you. I think there's something so feel-good about sitting with an elephant herd. Especially when they're doing something interesting like having a really lovely dust bath. So, sitting watching this little Ellie having a dust bath, Nimi, who is a 15-year-old viewer, and Laura, you were both wondering how the dust helps the elephant. And it's one of those things that it's really easy to see how mud might help, but I honestly think that dust, Mapani bee out of my mouth, sorry, additional protein there. I think it's something that feels good against their skin. I think for all the little niggles and itches, they don't get the major external parasites like most other animals do, or not to the same extent, certainly, just because their skin is so thick. But I think it provides a nice extra layer to protect their skin from the burn of the sun, because even though they're not going to get a sunburn, they can still feel the heat of it beating down. So I think it forms a nice layer. And then it catches any of those little external itches that they might have, as well as any parasites that might be there. I think they enjoy the feel of it. And we see birds do it as well, using the dust to help clean them, or clean themselves, and catch any parasites on their feathers. And that's similar to what the elephant's doing. She's throwing it over her. I think the feel of the grains cascading down is also, I really honestly think they just enjoy the feeling as well, not just a practical reason. I'm going to slide forward now that she's relaxed with us and feeding. I'm going to just roll forward ever so slightly, see if we can get a view of the rest of the herd as well, who are also having a dust bath in the drainage line. Sorry, girlie. Hello. And Steph, a very close friend of mine who is watching in Switzerland. Oh, head shake. All right, girl, we're not going to come any closer. Steph, you were wondering whether I know whether an elephant's toenails grow throughout their lives. Pretty sure they do. As far as I know, yes. Okay, girl. All right. Found a nice tree to munch on. That might have looked as though she was running away from us. I don't think she was. I think she was keeping an eye on us, but it's just a very steep hill. And sometimes they move faster downwards than normal. Steph, I'm pretty sure that an elephant's toenails wear down regularly and that they must constantly grow. Much like animals' claws and much like Lexi's claws, which we had Steph had plenty of first-hand experience with in the early stages. Been trying to work out what trees the elephants have been focusing on at this time of drought, and it seems like buffalo thorns are the way to go, and that's what she's targeting again now. I've noticed them feeding on buffalo thorns a lot. Breaking at the end. And Angelo, you were saying that you're amazed that oxpeckers avoid the elephants as they do. And we were discussing a little bit about the fact that they're pretty much impervious to external parasites. Their skin is too thick for the mouth parts of ticks to actually be able to draw blood from them, except in the absolute softest of places. So around the anus and maybe around the genitals. I also think that elephants would be highly intolerant of the presence of oxpeckers. They seem to be particularly picky about what's in their personal space. But mostly they're avoided because for the oxpecker it's not worth it. They don't get much off elephants. Elephants generally don't carry ticks in the same way that buffalo and the other animals do. It is interesting though, because the skin of an elephant cannot be that much thicker than the skin of a rhino. And yet you see far, far less parasites on them than you do on elephants. Marching off. Smart redhead, you would really like me to go and investigate the animal that's stuck in the mud. I'm going to explain to you a little bit about why I'm not going to do that at this moment. As soon as I can, then I will. But for now, first of all, it's a blind corner. This road that we're looking at the moment, that moves down here, that's really our only access to getting around to the other side of the dam. I could loop around through the dam, drive off-road, and around that way. The problem is that if that animal over there is still alive, by driving, I'd have to drive very, very close to it if I drove around in that direction. And what that's going to do is it's just going to really add to the stress levels of an already distressed animal. So I'm going to leave it there in the mud. If I drive down here now, chances are, most likely, the elephants are going to panic and they're going to run away, which isn't fair on them because it's a blind corner, as you can see. We're going to come as not a surprise to them, but they're not going to be impressed by our presence. So coming around the corner, we're going to startle them, and they're going to run away, most likely, or they're actually going to charge the vehicle. And at this time of year, stressing out elephants more than we need to is hugely unfair because we're in their personal space, and it's just something that I'm not comfortable with at all. We had a very, very close encounter with an elephant bull yesterday evening. It wasn't live, it was just VM and myself, but he gave us a very clear indication that the elephants at the moment are not happy, and it's because they're stressed out, they're hot, they're having to walk huge distances in order to get any kind of access to water, they're having to cover more distance in order to get food. So I'm sort of stuck at the moment until the elephants decide to move off. This one cow is standing in the road. We don't know what's happened during her day. She might have a young calf with her. She might have been harassed by other vehicles driving past along one of the main access roads. We just don't know. And and I don't particularly feel when we're in their space that I want to add any more pressure to their lives. At the end of it all, we are privileged enough to be in their home. I would be distinctly irritable if somebody barged through my personal space. I'm going to accord them the same courtesy. Particularly, and this is an interesting lesson for everybody, is that every animal, when you interact with them, you have a sense of where you're interacting from. The fact that we are towering, not really towering, but at the moment we are quite far above the elephants. If we descend from downhill with them trapped in a drainage line, it adds an equal level of, or an extra level of stress for them. So approaching from above an animal, they immediately find you more threatening, whereas approaching from below, and that's sometimes useful, especially if you're walking and you find yourself in a very uncomfortable situation. The first thing that, or generally the first thing that we're all trained to do, is to look for higher ground. Something like a termite mound gives you more of a psychological advantage over that particular animal, because you've just become bigger than them and you're looking down on them. Just an interesting aside, and something that I've learned whilst walking as well, that your positioning above or below an animal plays a huge role. As we talk, I'm trying to dodge the concerted efforts of the Mapani bees. And Cheryl, apparently your dad mentioned that if you kill one, the rest come to the funeral. And I'm certainly experiencing that now, and he was absolutely correct. They do, and they secrete, the dying bee secretes a pheromone that attracts the rest of the flies, or the rest of the bees. So they're all currently swarming around me. I didn't mean to kill that one. I just reached up to scratch my ear, and I'm now covered in a swarm of them. They're all seeking out moisture, which means eyeballs and ears. And they're swarming around me. Tibbs, how are you doing back there? You seem okay. Yeah, Tibbs is surviving. Tibbs doesn't have too many around, but they go straight into the corner of your eyes or two around the sweat glands. She's pushing over a tree. They're doing that a lot as well. The trees are also paying the price for the drought. The elephants are pushing them over more and more, which is, of course, naturally what they do. But they're looking for access to roots as well as to some of the greener leaves at the top that might be a little bit more filled with nutrients, growing from growth points at the tops of trees. Elephants are natural keystone species. What's that little one doing? Having a dig, digging for roots. Looks like it was. Using its ankles. And that's the female that we started with originally, I think. With the nice straight pointed tusks. Moved off a little bit, so we can. We're still not going to be able to get all the way down to the. Actually, we're not going to be able to get anywhere. I forgot I was in Rusty. I need to power off so that I can start Rusty's engine. And in the meantime, James has made it to the wild dogs.
Right, everybody, we've driven here onto the far western corners of Arethusa, and we're sitting with the wild dog pack. I can't tell which pack this is at the moment, and at the moment I can't even count how many there are. They're breathing heavily. It's obviously been a very hot day. It remains a hot day, and they've obviously eaten also fairly recently. They've got fat bellies, and they're just enjoying the shade. I can see two. We're not going to move forward at the moment. I can see two in the distance there. One standing, one lying down. Brian, how many can you see here? See if you can count them, everyone. I think I've got 4 here on the ground. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 2 in the background. There, you can probably see the one coming up now. There we go. And completely unlike the cats, they will be quite active during the day. Lions in that stage of corpulence will be flat out asleep. Just so special. This is the second sighting we've had in them in the last few days. Magnificent that we have had this opportunity to spend so much time with these dogs. Like I said to you earlier, quite a lot of them around at the moment. 2 different packs, maybe even 3 different packs around at the moment. Now, I cannot hear the final control, so the dulcet tones of Kirsten, Red, McLennan, Smith are a mystery to me. So if you do hear your question repeated by Brian, it's because Brian is the only one in contact with her. Things I've noticed about the drought at the moment, the heat, is the silence. So if we are quiet, you can just hear the sort of gentle speaking of the rangers around here, some of the guests. But there are no birds. Just the odd woodland kingfisher, but they'd call in the middle of a volcano. Nothing else. Some little babblers I heard off to the side. Check. There was a question, everybody. We didn't get it. We'll try and get it again for you now. Because we're so far west, the comms are quite difficult out here. That's the sound of a vehicle moving, obviously. I can now speak a little bit more normally because I'm not speaking to the guests on the other side of a vehicle. Just getting static.
Gracie is asking something about the water and animals.
Sorry, Gracie, I know you're trying to ask a question about the water and the animals, and if I know you, you're asking probably how are they getting enough water. Well, I'm going to guess that that's what you asked, Gracie. We're on Arethusa. There's a big dam not too far from here, and so these dogs will have gone down to the dam at some stage during the day to have a bit of a drink, some water to drink. Right, once that vehicle's out, we're going to move into a slightly different position and get a slightly better view. I don't know which pack this is. I don't know how many there are in total here. And I'm a little bit confused by the whole situation, to be honest. But let's try and figure it out. Just ahead of Cheetah Plains car. He might have an idea which pack this is. I've got no idea myself. see that I was saying to the VR rig as we were driving in here that the dappled light in the shade is quite difficult to see. You may even be able to hear Craig describing what WildEarth does. Very good description, Craig. Well done, Craig.
Hello, Craig.
That's exactly what we do. Do you know which pack this is?
Pardon?
Do you know which pack this is?
I'm afraid it's the investing pack.
Where are the rest?
I have no idea.
Oh. So Craig, I don't know if you heard that. Craig said this is the Investic pack, so that's the 3 adults and 11 babies.
I haven't heard of any other packs coming through the area.
No.
These guys were last Zimbabwe.
Yeah. So maybe the others are at the dam, perhaps having a water break, but who knows? Right, I got a communication from Kirsten basically through the ether. It's a little bit like trying to talk with the deity. Goodbye.
Everybody check the what?
I don't know.
I don't know if you copied that update. Karula across north back in the
Did she?
Okay.
All right, great, thank you. I'll send that update through to Jenny. No,
She operating that side
she's operating there, yes. We're far west, obviously.
Yes.
Can't hear any communication. Might not be live, might be, don't know.
Just winging it.
Just winging it, yeah. Presenting to Brian, basically.
Well, if you want, we can stick around a bit and you can present to...
No, I'm good, thank you.
Sure.
Yeah.
We give you a larger audience. You know you don't mind.
Bye-bye, Craig.
Well, then that's
Will you let me know? I've got bad comms here, so if anyone else is here, just let them know only one here.
Okay, copy. I think it's Darby or Andres is in now, and then Darby's making his way, and I think Louis might be on
Okay.
third stand.
All right, cool. Thank you very much.
No problem.
See you there. Bye-bye, everyone. All right, sorry about that, everybody. We do have to set up neighbourly relations with everyone. I did get a communication from Kirsten. There was a question that has now slipped my mind about. From Lady Macbeth. Lady Macbeth, it's been a while since we spoke. You want to know if any of these dogs are collared? They don't seem to be collared at all. No, the Investec pack, if this is the Investec pack, which we think it is, are not collared. There will be pictures, certainly profile pictures of each side, left and right, of each of the dogs, and those would have been sent through to the Kruger Park Scientific Services, and they'll have a full database of who the dogs are, but at the moment none of them are collared. Brian, should we sneak forward a little bit? So I also had to ask Craig about updates as to who was coming here and who wasn't. Here. What's going on? Then I just want to try and communicate basically through you to Kirsty, who can then talk to Jamie and tell her that Karula crossed north into the Mulwati from Little Gowrie this morning. So if Jamie is around the Mulwati drainage line, it might be a good idea to check on Karula. The final control. Yeah, that's just amazingly confusing. Anyway, so it goes with the leopards. She may have crossed south and then crossed north again. Look at them breathing so hard. I wonder where the rest are. Still dribbling, one of them is, on the left-hand side. So obviously they're not in too much water stress. They certainly will be very hot though. a little bit worried that the others aren't here. And I don't know if anybody saw them arriving at the Arethusa Dam during the day, but certainly they apparently ran past the Arethusa Dam sometime around 3 o'clock this afternoon. So maybe they went there and had a drink, and the pack has split up slightly. I'm sure they'll rejoin each other. They could have been separated. Maybe they came across a hyena or something, or 2 or 3 hyenas and they were separated. Who knows? But it's too hot for them to worry too much at the moment about looking for their relatives.
Can I have a question?
Yes, Brian.
From Scorpion 03.
73.
73.
Yes.
I've changed 3 times already.
Yes.
What kind of prey do the dogs take down?
Right, Scorpion 73. Thank you for your question via Brian. Scorpion, you want to know what, sorry, I've just found that a wonderful Twitter handle. You want to know what wild dogs take down, what do they eat? Scorpion, medium to large antelope, or small antelope out here. So that could be anything from steenbok, which is a sort of 11 kilogram or 25 pound chestnut-coloured antelope, up to the size of in this particular area, maybe a small wildebeest. They may take a kudu cow, which is a large antelope weighing, well, sort of 150 to 180 kilograms, multiplied by 2.2 will take us to roughly, well, a really big one of 400 pounds, but probably about 350 pounds. For a kudu cow, they might take out one of those here. Unlikely, though. Mostly it will be impala, which are the medium-sized antelope that we get here. Big male, 70 kilos, and a female around about 50. So 50 kilograms, about 170 pounds for a female impala. And of course, scorpion, there are lots and lots of baby impala around at the moment, and so they'll be feasting on those. Now, we're not going to sit here for too long because I know that there are a few vehicles trying to get into the sighting. So I'm not sure where the others are, though. But once another vehicle arrives, it will be time for us to press on, especially as I cannot hear anything. And Brian has got sort of 3 out, well, probably 2 out of 5 communication.
1.5.
1.5. So if you're asking questions and wondering why on earth I'm not answering them, I promise you I'm not ignoring you. It is the trials of technology. But we are sending you a picture at least, which is fantastic. Now, these are definitely the youngsters. I don't think there are any adults here at the moment. I'm still scanning around here just to see if I can't find some more dappled shapes under the trees. Here's some alarm calling in up ahead. Sounds like some batises, chin spot batises. Chip, 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 chip. Maybe the rest of the dogs are up there in the shade.
Got another question.
Yes.
Mark in Cape Town.
Yes.
Do the wild dogs mate like regular dogs and stay together after mating? Mark in Cape Town.
Thank you, Brian. You heard that from Brian. Mark, you're in Cape Town. Wonderful to hear from home on the southern tip of the great African continent. You want to know if dogs mate like regular dogs and do they stay together afterwards? I'm a little confused. You mean do they get locked together? Certainly, I don't think they get locked together, Mark.
Remain a couple.
Yeah, but they do absolutely remain a couple, Mark. They're the alpha pair. The alpha, I think that chap's going off to look where those birds are alarm calling. The alpha pair will definitely stay together. They form a monogamous pair, and they will lead the pack, and they will mate year after year until one of them dies, and then that alpha will be replaced by another dominant male or female, dependent on which one died. A very clever move there by that other game drive chap. I think he's from Chitwa, I think they were. and the tracker also picked up on the alarm calling Battises. I'm just trying to follow what's going on the radio here. Don't want to overstay me welcome. Yeah, I think that's. I can hear the Battis is still alarm calling around there. Chip, 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 chip. Maybe these dogs are going to go over there now. Nope, lie down again. Too exhausting. We will go through there and have a look. Let's just stay here for a little while.
We have another question in from Adrenaline Rush.
Adrenaline Rush?
Why are the dogs endangered?
Now, Adrenaline Rush, a very pertinent and very clever question. Why are these dogs endangered? They're the most successful hunters out here, 70% to 80% success rate, much more successful than any of the cats. And why on earth should they be endangered? Well, initially, of course, Adrenaline Rush, they were shot by farmers who came into the area, and they considered the dogs vermin. They were considered to be nasty killers who killed with unnecessary pain to the potential prey, which is, of course, absolute nonsense. But then they came into contact with domestic dogs, and through their contact with domestic dogs, they've come to die of things like rabies and canine distemper, and they pick up all sorts of domestic dog diseases. And because they are so poor at staying within the boundaries of game reserves, they wander very widely. They'll go under fences at moment's notice. They do still come into contact with domestic dogs, and because there are so few of them, a disease can run through the population really fast and really take its toll. So that's basically why they're endangered. Human pressure, habitat loss, and domestic dog diseases would be the major three things that have affected the wild dogs in this area. Alrighty, everybody, I think we're going to call this quits. We've had a wonderful sighting of the dogs. There are other people trying to get into the sighting. I'm just not sure. And we obviously can't talk to the final control, so I'm just not sure. I don't want to overstay our welcome. I know there is someone else coming in. We're going to take a quick turn around where that other vehicle went to see if we can't see the others. And let's just pop around there and see now. So the chin-spot Battises were sitting in a bush there, and I could just hear them going dip, 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 dip. And if they see a predator, even if it's a predator, I mean, a chin-spot Battis for a wild dog would be nothing more than a very small snack. And I think what you'll find is that, all the birds will alarm call just about all the predators, so it's quite interesting. And despite the fact that those Battises, of course, pose no threat by the dogs at all. So we'll just have a quick look through here. Yes. The other vehicles are either looking at a Peltiforum africanum tree with great enthusiasm, or there's some dogs lying underneath it. To see the rest of them. Got them. See them? I can't see them. there then. Ahe, minjani? Umakhume njani? Swinyanyana. Mitlarile ngopfu. Oh, ikwi. Okay, inkomo. Loko wambona wamrungula futhi. All right, so I was just asking them, did they find them using the birds? And they said absolutely. It was the call of the chin spot batters that attracted them. Here's the rest of the pack. I'm pleased to report the pack seems to be fully intact. So with that news, I think we're going to disappear from this area, head back towards Juma, and see what we can find there. Itafamba. Itlekatita umala. Yeah. Oh, itajika so. Oh, okay. Okay, let's head across to Jamie, see what she's doing, and we'll get out of here and see you when we have some radio signal.
Okay, so we have a bit of an answer to our mystery animal. It is a 100%, or no, that's not entirely true. It is a relatively still healthy, functioning hippo. As soon as we came around the corner, he jumped up and raced away from us. So I'm actually very, very glad that we ended up waiting for the elephants and taking the long way around, rather than trying to loop back close to him, because he's feeling hugely under threat and very, very uncomfortable. And animals in those kind of situations are particularly dangerous. So he was lying in that patch of mud there. As we came up and around, he jumped up and raced off, moving incredibly rapidly, demonstrating why hippos are probably one of the most underestimated creatures out here. And I've heard of a lot of people heading across to investigate what they thought were dead hippos, only to discover that they were very, very much alive. So we didn't get particularly close to him as we came up and around, but he is feeling so uncomfortable at this point that he shot up and disappeared. He's gone into the bushes to the north of Buffelshoek Dam. Obviously, given the state that he's in, I'm not going to try and follow him. So just going to give a little bit of an explanation as to what I think has happened here. It's a big old bull. A male similar to sort of Peter the pond hippos, or Peter in the pan, similar to his sort of size. And I think he's found himself pushed out of one of the other dams, as we spoke about plenty of times with Peter. With the space becoming more and more restricted and the dam shrinking and the number of options available, there's not that many around.
Any updates?
Let me turn that down for the moment. I turned it up just so that I could listen to Craig's update about Karula. So I think he's been pushed out. He might even have wandered too far away, thought that perhaps in his nocturnal feeding wanderings, he could come across to Buffelshoek Dam and spend the day here. I don't think he was expecting to have found it as dry as it was. And it got to the point where the temperatures were incredibly high in the middle of the day, and he decided to go and utilize the mud as a way of keeping safe and relatively cool, not majorly, but at least protecting his incredibly sensitive skin. And hippos do have very, very sensitive skins. So I'm happy to report that he is healthy, he is mobile, he is very mobile. In fact, he moved incredibly quickly out of our vision and up across the drainage line. And I'm going to leave him. I'm not going to try and follow him or pressure him in any way. You'll probably find that he returns to this mud wallow for another hour. Oh no, actually it's nearly 6 o'clock. Might actually be time for him to start heading across to see if he can find an accepting dam and an accepting pod of hippos somewhere around here. Paul, whether or not it's Bob, I honestly have no idea. It's very difficult to identify him. Obviously, the moment that we saw him was very brief. I think he heard us coming and decided it was time to skedaddle. Could it be Bob? Yes, it is a male. It's quite a large male, and from what we could see of Bob, or what we knew of Bob, he was quite a big, large male. I've sometimes had moments where I've wondered whether Peter the Pan hippo is not Bob the Bachelor, but that, of course, we'll never know. Very difficult to identify individual hippos unless you've really clearly got a distinguishing scar or some kind of injury that takes a long time to heal. Hippos actually heal incredibly rapidly and incredibly quickly, largely due to, or one of the reasons is due to that substance that they secrete. They secrete a sort of a red, oily substance that gave rise to that belief that they sweat blood. It's not blood. It is a really nice sunblock substance, but it's also got very powerful antimicrobial agents, so things like antibacterial, antiviral agents in it. It's something that scientists and biologists are actually looking at to explore as an option of imitating, in a way, of natural sunscreen, so imitating the compounds within the hippo. While I'm talking to you, I'm scouring the place to try and see if I can see him, but I don't. I think he's moved off, and I think that we should too. I think that we should leave him with the option open to return back to his pan, his mud. In terms of the impact on the hippos of this area, this drought has probably hit them the hardest out of any mammals. It's one of those really sad situations, and one that we are relatively powerless to intervene in. And David, who's watching in the UK, David, you wanted to know which is more detrimental to the hippos or more serious for them. A lack of grass to eat. There he is. That's him there, hiding in the shade. A lack of grass or a lack of access to water. I think that's him. Is that him? That looks like him. David, far and away, the most serious for hippos would be a lack of access to water and to space. They will die if left for a couple of days outside of water. They overheat, their skin burns, dries up, and they become very weak very fast. So by far is the most detrimental is the lack of water. And not to drink, it's because they are by nature aquatic creatures. They're adapted, they're evolved to live in water. That is him. Obviously going to give him plenty of space. Sure. One of those very, very tough moments to see, and I know difficult for all of us, but I'm not saying that this hippo is going to die. I think that this hippo, judging by the speed it moved out of the mud, he is alive, well, and kicking. And I think he'll be okay. I think he's going to try and find his way back to another dam. There's a nice big dam around Torchwood. There's a couple of nice big remaining dams around Buffelshoek. Yes, there we go. You can see him nicely now. And he's now just, looks like he's just grazing. A bit forward. Yes. Forward a bit. You good? Slightly clearer view. And you can see, even at this distance, quite a large bull. So yes, I think there is a possibility that it was Bob. who actually always was a little bit uncomfortable with people coming around, and particularly when there's absolutely no water. At the moment, he looks like he's grazing. Although he's going to struggle to find nutritious grass on that side. Okay, Bob, we'll leave you to decide whether or not to go back to your dam. And a hippo like this would be exceptionally dangerous to encounter on foot. And Eric, you've read somewhere that their tusks do not yellow with age. I think that's fairly true. In my experience, I've never seen a hippo with particularly yellow tusks. I guess it makes sense because they're quite well protected within their mouths, unlike elephants, which are exposed. And for those of you who are unfamiliar with hippo anatomy, the reason, or one of the reasons, apart from the fact that it weighs 2 tons and can cover 15 meters in 1 second, apart from that, the reason why they are so dangerous is they've got ivory tusks within their mouths. 2 sets, one pointing straight up, one pointing downwards, and the males use those as very effective weapons. The females as well can use them to protect themselves. And they are considered to be ivory, so the same substance that elephant tusks are made of, but obviously sit within the hippo mouth itself and used purely as spears for stabbing, particularly between other males. Now, I can't see any evidence of injuries on this particular hippo. He looks fine to me. You can see an oxpecker there, getting rid of any parasites that might be around his toes, trapped in the mud. He looks okay to me. I think he might have just wandered a little bit far from home. All right, hippo, we'll leave you be. Let you go about your evening business. Let's go follow up on those reports that Karuna came wandering into Djuma. Apparently she came moving through the Mulwati at some point after drive this morning. Now we have to play Guess Where Karuna Went. She's one of the most unpredictable cats out here. I think if I were her, given the temperature that the day has been, I think I'd stick around the Mulwati. Maybe spend a little bit of time in that drainage line and make use of all of the trees and shade that it provides. It might be worth a trip around. Interesting article recently, just continuing on the subject of our hippo friend, and I saw an interesting article about pink hippos in Kenya, or a hippo with a rare sort of color variation, quite an unusual one that made it much lighter than normal hippos. And as you can imagine, if normal hippos struggle with the sun, just imagine what kind of a struggle an albino or a slightly leucistic hippo might struggle with. David, you were wondering whether any of the guides have ever seen albino animals. I can only speak for myself and say that only pictures of them. I have seen white lions before, but that's not true albinism. That is an example of leucism. So they don't lack complete pigment. That's why their eyes are not red, they're blue. So I've never seen any example other than, or any kind of variation apart from that. And I've seen king cheetahs as well. But beyond that, I've never seen any wild form, more eddies, of an albino animal, or indeed a melanistic animal. Now, something that always fascinates people, but of course, albinism in particular out here is incredibly rare. It does happen, but it is very, very rare. First of all, it's a recessive gene, so you need 2 carriers from your parents. After that, it's also the fact that if you are an albino animal out here, you are going to find yourself, first of all, the target of predators, because white shows up incredibly clearly in the bush, and also the fact that the sun is going to do tremendous damage to your skin. He's moving off his hook, so don't need to worry. So David, no, not personally. I have yet to be fortunate enough to encounter an example of albinism or melanism in the wild. The closest I have come has been white lions. Particularly because their skin is so sensitive. Oh, well, I've got some wonderful news. While we go look for Karula, James is on his way to help as well. So I think if I approach from the
from one endangered mammal, everybody, to an endangered bird, a ground hornbill. Now, we've been seeing a flock of them, a flock of 3, then we saw a flock of 4 the other day, and this seems to be a flock of 1. But it may well be that there are others. Just in there, there's another one. 2 of them. I hear. No. I've got my own tool. All right. All right. That was Roy of Arethusa. Unfortunately, there's no other way for him to get past us. And there go the ground hornbill. Well, that was a nice sighting. Nice little surprise. Right, our plan now is to go towards the Morawati drainage line, which is the one just over the next rise there. And that's where Karula was seen coming north this morning. Now, like I say, I find this an astonishingly confusing situation because we had female leopard tracks around about the final control. We had the squirrels alarm calling, we had the Nyala alarm calling, we had everything alarm calling. We didn't find the leopard, of course. Who's that? I don't know who that was walking around there. Maybe it wasn't actually a leopard. Maybe there was a hyena lurking around, and that's what they were alarm calling at. And perhaps those tracks were from earlier on. Who knows? Anyway, we're out of Arethusa and back on Juma. Mike in Florida, a very interesting question about whether or not anyone can become a tracker. Mike, a
it depends what you mean by a tracker. So basically you've got a situation where at most of these lodges you've got a ranger or guide, excuse the corrugations please, you've got a ranger or guide who basically is doing what I'm doing, and then you have a tracker who sits on the front of the vehicle who tracks animals. And in some cases they don't do much more than sit on the front of the car and spot animals, but in many of these areas the trackers get off and follow animals on foot, and so that's what a tracker is. So Mike, I'm not sure which one you mean, but if you mean a tracker, like the guys on the front of the cars who go off on foot and find animals, yes, there are courses you can do out here, some better than others. A friend of mine runs an amazing course, but it's only for sort of unemployed rural South Africans down at Londolozi. He does an incredible job training trackers. But there are a number, and there is a commercial arm to that you can do through, I think it's eco training, so you can do tracking through them, and you can learn to track, and absolutely you can, I suppose you could come and work as a tracker. I've never seen a foreign tracker. There are plenty of foreign people though who do this job that I'm doing. I've met French, Bermudans, English, Gabonese. I don't think I've ever met an American who does it. But Mike, you could be the first. In York, I'm assuming. You want to know, you say you realise there's a positive effect on the local people by tourists coming here and providing jobs, and you want to know, are there any negative aspects to the people and parks nexus, if you like, where, you know, people and parks intersect? Actually, it's a controversial subject that I don't want to get particularly too in-depth into. Safe to say that obviously conservation areas throughout the world are conflicted areas in some respects. So the initial kind of idea behind these areas was sort of fortresses and fences. So you put a big fence around an area, you throw the people that were living there out, and then you police them, guard them. And then after that it came to the sort of much more liberal, if you like, community-based natural resource management and community-based conservation, community participatory conservation, where communities were included in the management of their old areas and they were sort of given benefits from them. Then, as that kind of approach failed to deliver the results that everybody hoped, and the wilderness areas continued to shrink and shrink and shrink, and species became more and more endangered, and populations became larger and larger, there was a kind of a movement towards a return to the fortress method, where we decided as human beings, well, I mean, there was a school of thought where it was decided that because of the threat to wilderness areas and to wildlife and to species and biodiversity, we have to have areas that we can simply shut off from human access and say no one may go there, and that's just the way it is. In this area, we're still muddling through the CBNRM, or community-based natural resource management kind of space. I think it's the most difficult, but it's definitely the route that it has to go. We have to include local people on the outside of the reserves. There's a big elephant, and the reason for that is simply because. Of course, these areas are conservation areas mainly because the people who are conserving them now, the ancestors of the original conservationists, were the ones who shot out all the animals with their guns and their greed and their searching for ivory. Local people never did that. And so they're kind of a lot of the logic around the conflict comes where local people say, well, you know, our ancestors didn't destroy all the wildlife here. Yes, sure, there are too many people now to survive off the land, but you know, it wasn't our ancestors that elephant is upset about something. Anyway, so that's a very basic introduction to what's going on with the people and parks nexus. It's a fascinating subject. Lots of people will have different opinions on it. I don't know. It's all for everybody to make their own minds up. I think the important thing is, though, to accept that nobody has the answer. Nobody has exclusive rights to animals and wild spaces, and we need to find a way that it can work for everybody. The simple fact of the matter remains that until we as human beings stop overpopulating the planet, the problem ain't going to go away. And the other thing is that people out here, of course, there's this elephant, he doesn't look very happy about life. He's a young bull. The other thing about these areas, of course, is that local people, if given the choice, don't want to come and hunt animals in a dangerous game area. They'd far rather do exactly what you and I do, and that's go to the shops and have the ability to buy their veggies, or you might happily grow their veggies, but buy a loaf of bread, buy some milk. And they don't want to come in here and hunt impala on a daily basis. It's dangerous, it's hot, and it's not particularly efficient. Really, it's jobs, a way to make a living. Here's this young bull elephant, looking a little bit stroppy about life. Hello? What has got up your nose, fellow? Is it the drought? You can see something's got up his nose by the fact that he is streaming from his temporal gland, which is between his eye and his ear. That's an indicator of stress of some sort. Could be the heat, could be that he's met up with a big bull who's given him a fright. You hear him talking? I don't know if you can hear him, he's making a lovely noise. Tricia in Toronto, what a wonderful query. You want to know if I think elephants can pick up on my emotions? I don't know, Tricia. Part of me says yes, part of me says no. The scientist in me says no, and the human in me says yes. And I do know, I'll tell you this, some people are charged by elephants a lot more than other people. And some of the most sensitive rangers I know, one of whom I used to work with down south at Dondolozi, she used to get charged all the time. She had no idea. She wasn't afraid of them. She was the most sensitive, most conservation-minded, lovely woman, and she used to get revved by these things constantly. Are they picking up on some kind of emotional state? Are they picking up on something they don't like, a pheromone? I don't know. I think that they can. I also think that we can pick up their emotional state quickly, and I think some people are able to do that better than others. And I mean, some people are just sensitive to those sorts of energies, and I know. I think in some respects you can drive into a herd of elephants, you don't watch any body language, and there's something about them that says, "Stay away from me, please." And if you are sensitive to that sort of thing, I think you'll definitely pick up on it. Brian, I mean, you're quite sensitive to those sorts of energies, aren't you? So a guy like Brian will go into a herd of elephants, and you can just feel. You'll feel uncomfortable or you'll feel fine. It just depends. So I think they project their emotions very nicely. Whether we do the same, I don't know. I'm going to leave that elephant. We're going to go down into the drainage line here and see if we can't find the Kurula. Spend a bit of time down here. We're going to first of all go to the south, and then we'll turn around and go back north up the drainage. Wonderful. We have a new viewer all the way from Afghanistan, and your name is Arabian Desert, and you well, it's probably assume that's not your actual name. It's probably your internet personality, and you want to know about snakes and why we don't see more of them here. Arabian Desert, there are lots of snakes around here. We do see them from time to time, but they're normally very afraid of us, and so they move away. But there are lots of snakes around, and I'm very interested to hear that you say you see a snake every week or so. That's fascinating. I'd love to know what kind of snakes you're seeing, and what species they are, and in what sort of habitat they live. That would be great. So let us know. And thank you for getting hold of us. Keep talking to us. Good to hear from you, all the way from Afghanistan. So she was seen walking north up this drainage line from the other side there. How far up she went, where she went after that, well, that does tend to be anyone's guess these days with spirit leopards, that is Karula. Brian, you will tell me if you see Karula, won't you? Well, I think so. Thanks. Okay, that would be very kind. The other thing I would like to do again today, of course, is just go and quickly check in my little hyena den and see if there's any movement from what I believe to be some little cubs in there. Right, let's head across to Jamie. She is on some wildebeest, well, not on them, she's looking at them. Let's head across to her while I continue the search for the Queen of Juba.
We've got a really magnificent male wildebeest. Unfortunately, on the move, very much on the move. I'm going to try and stay with him. Tibbs is doing a fantastic job of contorting himself to stay on the seat whilst turning backwards. Let's try and reverse in a straight line, or not straight line, depending on where the road is. Let's see if we can't catch up with him. He is really a magnificent male. Nope. Nope. This is not going to work. He's just going to keep moving. Okie dokie. Well, we shall leave him to his own devices then. He was a magnificent male, and of course quite common to see males out on their own, defending territories as opposed to the zebra's approach of defending a herd and moving about with his own harem. Wildebeest defend nice territories. They look for the best possible food, the best possible access to water, and then they wait for the ladies to come to them. Two completely different approaches from plains game that fill essentially the same ecological niche, but interesting to see the difference between them. Come through to Vubu Road. We know that Karula loves this particular block, so I wanted to approach from as far north as possible. Just double check around here first. Even though today was 40 degrees in the shade, I still think there's a distinct possibility that she was moving in the middle of the day. Leopards are hugely unpredictable in that sense. They move when the textbooks say they shouldn't be, they should be sleeping. And they don't really stay, particularly Karula. I've noticed, although she might lie down for brief periods, she does not stay flat cat for long at all. Which is why I'm making sure I check as far north as possible first. I would love, if there was a way of conducting this without interfering, I would love to get GPS coordinates for her 4 times a day, every day, and just plot on a map her movements and where she goes, and try and see if there's any kind of a pattern to the way that she moves, or if it is completely random. Obviously when she's hunting it would be all over the place. I'd love to know, I would love to know for all leopards if they have specific paths that they walk in a specific order. I are hearing the same thing, which is why I'm giggling. But I'll say it out loud for those of you watching. So Steph would like to know from Tebs what his favorite animal is, and if perhaps it is a leopard, because he's so good at spotting them. And I share in Steph's request when I ask that Tebs spots a leopard for us today. So Tebs, is a leopard your favorite animal?
Yeah, it is.
It is. Tebs says it is. And in fact, Tebs has always been extraordinary at spotting leopards. He's got some kind of special leopard eyes. We noticed it from the very beginning when he first started working with us on Juma. He spotted, I think there was a period where we were driving together where Tebs spotted a leopard a day, possibly even a leopard per drive. 2 once. So we've got a good chance. We've got Tebs' luck and charm, vision to help spot Karula and figure out where she might be hiding. What's your second favorite animal, Tebs? Lions. So Tebs is definitely a big cats kind of man. I struggle. I've yet to be able to work out what my favorite animal is. I know my rough top 5, but my absolute favorite changes day to day to day. And actually, the more I learn about some of the more unusual species, the more I enjoy and appreciate them as well. So I can't choose. All right, let's get our leopard spotting eyes on. Wati feeds up into this drainage line around the Juma Dam, which means that if Karula was following the path along there, there's a chance she might pop out here. And as I said, there is a good chance that she was moving throughout the day. She does not a cat that likes to sit idle. And actually, a smart leopard, particularly a small female that's in less danger of overheating, a smart leopard might well utilize the middle of the day. It's when the animals probably are least on their guard because they don't really expect much to be moving around. And a lot of them spend that hottest middle part of the day sleeping in the shade. As we've seen, for example, yesterday with that impala herd with all of the babies sleeping around there. That's not to say that they are not alert. Their senses are always pretty sensitive. But you never know exactly when the best time. I think it's a good time for a leopard to be hunting. And if a little female like Karula probably isn't in enormous danger of overheating. Big cats, big male lions, big female lions really struggle to move about in the middle of the day. You can almost guarantee that they're going to spend 20 to 22 hours out of their day fast asleep. Lying down at the very least. Oh my goodness. I know this gentleman. I know this gentleman very well. You'll have to take my word for it when I say that we're going to leave him. I found him to be exceptionally unpredictable yesterday. He's got two broken tusks and a rather grumpy. And as I said earlier, Liam and myself had a moment with him yesterday. Hello, Elise. There's a whole load of you here. I'm not avoiding all Ellies, I'm just avoiding that particular bull in question. He's exceptionally grumpy. Hi guys. Hello, little one. You're missing a tusk. What did you do to get rid of your tusk like that? And Joe, you are absolutely right. This drought, apart from putting quite serious stress on the animals, my word, his eyelashes are caked in mud. This is the herd that obviously was wallowing with James at the start of drive this afternoon in Jewel Pan. But yes, Joe, it is... I mean, I would say that we're always very much on high alert and really concentrating on what we're doing. But this drought has given us an extra level of awareness of how stressed the animals are, and therefore focusing very closely on their particular body language. And I'm sure that James has had a very similar approach to the one that I have had today, which is to be exceptionally careful in the way that we approach sightings. Now, in this case, I'm perfectly comfortable. This particular young bull, his tail's swinging away happily. He's munching away happily. He's quite chuffed with life. And he's not stressing me out. But I have been very, very careful over the last, particularly this afternoon. We're really starting to see it clearly in the animals themselves. They are severely under pressure. She's got a droopy ear, that female on the left, ever so slightly. Her right ear has got, I think, what looks like just ever so slightly damaged cartilage. It's her right ear, not her left, but unfortunately she turned her head away now. But she does have a bit of a droop to her ear. And as I said, this looks to me like the herd that James had earlier. And it's not just elephants that are showing stress. I'm seeing it in all of the general game species. Elephants, of course, have the tremendous power behind them, so they are a force to be reckoned with all by themselves. But I've noticed it even with some of the, for example, the wildebeest, the nyala and the kudu. They're particularly skittish. They're just not 4 tons when they get angry. There you go. Here's the little one coming from the left. Now, that one male that we saw when we first approached has a tusk missing that's been broken off. He's busy feeding. So unfortunately not presenting us with a very good view. And Caleb, you were wondering whether or not tusks will ever grow back. And the answer is no. Once they're broken like that, they might grow in a sort of a stunted way. But very often I've noticed when they are broken off completely, they never ever grow back. The nerves around them have been damaged. But of course, tusks grow throughout their lives, so if it's just broken halfway, then yes, they will grow. It's where they're broken off completely and where the nerve and the root of the tusk itself has been damaged that they stop to grow, or they stop growing. But that's a tricky one because that doesn't always work that way. An elephant might have broken its tusk halfway down, but a crack might extend into the root of the tooth itself because, of course, tusks are teeth. So if that does happen, if that crack extends in and some kind of bacterial infection gets in there, it could actually, in the end, prevent the tusk from growing, as well as being exceptionally painful for the elephant concerned. It's like having constant toothache, but in a huge tooth next to your face, and a tooth that weighs quite a bit. And probably every time they swing their trunk, it hurts. So an ellie with a sore tusk is definitely an upset elephant. Definitely a grumpy one. Hello, little one. Pop out in front of us. Only just starting to grow his little tusks. Oh, there's nothing I love more than a peaceful elephant sighting at this time of the evening. They really do sort of transmit such a sense of peace. There's another animal that I also think is incredibly peaceful looking, and that is a kudu, and James has one to show you now.
Indeed, kudu are especially peaceful, especially if you're sitting in the bottom of a drainage line where the shade is blotting out the last of the welding torch that is the poor excuse for a sun that has been blazing down on us all day from a completely cloudless sky. I said all of that in one breath. There we have a magnificent kudu bull. And he's got very widely spread horns, and his companion further in the bushes there has got fairly close together horns. I don't think that makes any real difference to their lives. If you happen to be of the persuasion that you like to shoot kudu, then you'll want the one with the wide horns, but you probably need your head red if that's what you want to do. Lovely two bulls, and you age them, of course, by the twists in the horns. One complete twist every 2 years. You get 1, 2, I'd say he's about 5 or 6 years old. That's a big mature bull. He's eating a bit of leadwood, a bit of knobthorn. Look how beautifully he's lit. Isn't that magnificent? Now, Gina, you're in Pennsylvania and you want to know, and this is not an uncommon query, so don't worry, the difference between a female kudu and a female nyala, because you say you do confuse them. Gina, once you've seen them together, you'll never confuse them again. The kudu, of course, are that kind of grayish color, grayish brown. The nyala are that sort of lovely chestnut color. But like impala coloured antelope, and they're also larger. Now, of course, where you're sitting from the screen, if you see one and then the other, your ability to tell the difference between the sides is almost impossible from just watching the screen. So what you're going to look for is the colour. They're both striped down the side, just like this bull is here. But that's the same colour as a kudu cow. And a nyala cow is much redder brown. Thought I heard an elephant flapping his ears, but it was Brian moving his not insubstantial legs. The flies are going to drive me insane.
go. Thank you, Arabian Desert. You've sent through a comment. I asked you what kind of snakes you get there, and you said something called a buffalo snake, I think. Buffalo snake and a viper's cross. And a viper's cross, is that correct, Kirsten? As in cross. K-R-A-T-S, krats, viper's krats. I don't know what those are. Sound like fascinating snakes, but viper, if it's a viper, it will be something like a puff adder, which we get out here. They're quite common snakes here. They've got a triangular shaped head, very pretty markings on the backs, sort of diamond shaped markings, a little bit like a rattlesnake in the US. And so they will be part of the viper family. I'm sure that's the same kind of snake. Definitely we find lots of snakes, as I say, Arabian Desert, just perhaps not so many live, and like I said, they do move away from us. I haven't seen many this year, and I suspect that's largely to do with the lack of water. So, Lynn, you're asking why I left the dogs. Lynn, I left the dogs because there were lots of people around that wanted to go and see them. And of course, because they're on Arathusa, we absolutely don't have priority. And there are lots and lots of different game drives driving around there. And so we had our sort of 20 minutes, and then we had to pull out. So that's why we left them, I'm afraid. It's perfectly normal. It's exactly what happens when you've got lots of people around. And if they happen to be moving when you find them, well, then you're very lucky. Juma has a slightly lower density of vehicles on it, and so we do tend to be able to spend quite a lot longer with animals here. Now, Mandy in Utah, you want to know why a kudu has got a hump on its back. Apparently there is some fat stored there, so they will store a bit of fat to see them through tough times in the hump. I don't think that's a huge amount stored there. That's the same as in an eland, which is the largest member of the tragelaphid family. That's the spiral-horned antelope, and eland is about 750 kilos, a huge, huge thing. You don't find them here, but they've got a big hump, and they store a little bit of fat in there. So I think that's the main reason. I also think it's just the top of the shoulders, like a wither. Up Twin Dams Road now. I didn't find any tracks of Karula, I'm afraid. I did find tracks of a hyena, which we then found, which was quite exciting. And unfortunately, he disappeared off into the thick bush. So now I'm going to go for my twice daily visit to the new hyena den and see what's there. With any luck, I shall be rewarded for my patience and fortitude. Some tiny baby little hyena cubs. So Brian, wouldn't do some tiny baby little hyena cubs be very nice for us? Yes, indeed. The sun has mercifully gone behind the bushes. Hopefully will set. Couldn't set fast enough today. Greatly hot. See the line of sweat on my cap, very distasteful, not my fault. Jamie is still with her Ellies. Let's head back across to her, and I will see you at the hyena den.
Still with our really stunning elephant herd. And we've had some really special, peaceful moments. This female's been talking to the rest of the herd. I'm not sure because she's been left behind. She is one of the stragglers with her two youngsters. But we've been getting those magical low rumbles. coming across from all of them. There's nothing more peaceful than sitting a beautiful African evening and listening to elephants talk to each other. My plan was to travel down the Mulwati from the northern section, rumbling happening again, and that hasn't quite worked out the way that I planned. Everywhere we turned, we encountered an elephant roadblock today. I'm definitely not complaining though. Chatting a bit about our favorite animals, they're definitely on the top 5 list for me. Stephanie is watching in California. You are absolutely right. You know that you are incredibly fortunate when you are close enough to a magnificent elephant to see the mud on its eyelashes, as we did with that young male. They just give you such a sense of well-being and comfort. Just checking behind me to make sure there's no elephants that I'm going to startle by moving forward. But absolutely, force is the wrong word, but I always take a moment every day, whether it's to watch the sunset or just to remind myself of how incredibly fortunate we are to be in the position that we are at the moment, and to spend time with all of these magical creatures around here. We are so lucky to be able to. The joys of these live safaris is the fact that we're not under any kind of pressure to move from sighting to sighting. We have spent so much time with certain individuals that we've got to know them to an extent. She's rumbling again. I'd love to know what she's saying. You really get to become intimately familiar with the way that animals behave out here. And I'm sure that many of our regular viewers... How cool is that? That is such an awesome sound. I love that feeling when they're up close to you. She's not that close. She's about 20 meters away, but I can feel that sound vibrating through the floor of the car. It's such an awesome feeling. I'd love to know what she's saying. I have no idea. She's getting a response from some of the other elephants off to my right. And no matter how many times I experience it or listen to it, that sound gives me goosebumps every time. I could feel that vibrating up through the floor. I could feel my foot vibrating where it's resting next to the pedals. That's how incredible that sound is. It's like having a lion roar next to you. We really are lucky people. And I'm very glad that we get to share these moments with all of you. Beautiful. Tibbs has used his wonderful spotting eyes to get us a really beautiful view of the sunset this evening. And hopefully this elephant conversation continues and we can listen to the sounds of the bush while we watch the sun go down. Just like that, it's gone. Awesome. A brief, beautiful, and peaceful moment spent surrounded by an elephant herd. We've still got a little bit of a view of our eddies here. And Lenny, you've asked a really good question about elephant tusks. So you wanted to know what kind of force it would take for an elephant to break its tusks. And that depends on the tusks themselves and how thick they are. But it would take a huge amount of force, in my opinion. Probably something that only really another elephant could inflict, or possibly if the elephant was running full tilt and managed to hook its tusk on something like a tree. That's of course unless it is unless it's already got some kind of fault or crack line in it. Little one's reaching up. It was begging for food earlier. Tiny little tusks growing through. And Lenny, you wondered if it's possible, since you know that some elephants are born without tusks, whether it would be possible for an elephant to be born with only one tusk. I don't see why not. Don't see that there's any reason. Look right into its pink little mouth. There's no reason why there wouldn't be elephants that are born with some kind of defect and that only one tusk grows. I think in much the same way that sometimes elephants are born completely without tusks. She's rumbling again. Hey, gorgeous girl. What are you saying? Have you been trying to avoid that big nail all day? I think possibly you have. The most common way for an elephant to break tusks. Sure. She's unsettled about something. I can hear the rumbling off to my right as well. I'm not sure exactly what it is they're saying. She doesn't seem terribly stressed out by her body language. But she is definitely communicating something to the rest of the herd. In terms of the most common ways, Lenny, that elephants will lose tusks, it'll be in a fight with another elephant, particularly bulls. They might also, as I said, have some kind of a crack, something that's been a defect within the tusk itself from the moment it started growing, and at which point, if they use it for digging or something along those lines, it might snap off naturally. It's quite unusual, though. Now, the elephant bull that I drove past to avoid has been following this herd the entire time. He had 2 broken tusks. He's only got stumps left at the base of each tusk. And I have no idea what caused them, and I have no idea if it's connected to the mood that he was in yesterday. They're not fresh breaks, they're old breaks. But it could well have been that something that he lost in a fight, and it might even be that he feels a little bit more vulnerable without them. Sorry, if you keep seeing me glance backwards, it's not because I'm nervous, I'm just keeping an eye on the elephant that moved up behind us. You've always got to have eyes in the back of your head when you're watching an elephant herd, particularly when you're surrounded by them. She's also got a floppy ear, this one that's coming up to our left. Oh no, it's not that floppy. Must have just been the way she was holding it. is completely open up to the Kruger National Park. And Gert has got an interesting point. He said it sometimes looks as though elephants within... Sorry, there's a conversation happening. I don't know what it means. I think they've been fairly unimpressed with that presence of the male. So Gert, you were saying it sometimes seems as though, as our male without the tusk wanders into shot, that private reserve elephants seem more relaxed than Kruger elephants. And you were wondering whether that has to do with bad behavior of tourists. And the answer, Gert, is yes, I actually agree with you. My experience has been quite similar. Generally, the thing about Kruger is that it is open to all members of the public. And people don't necessarily know how to handle elephants or the most appropriate ways of being around them. And quite often there have been historical cases of people really invading an elephant's personal space without necessarily meaning to. I don't think there's much maliciousness that goes on in that sense. It's just a sense of complete ignorance and people not realizing the impact that they have on an elephant's life, particularly when they come into its home. So yes, generally I have found elephants in Kruger to be slightly less relaxed than those of private reserves. There's also historic reasons behind it as well. And some of the elephants of the Kruger National Park have been deeply traumatized by events in their past. And some of these ellies will be old enough to remember the days of culling, where culling was a population control method. So they will be traumatized by that, and that might also play a role in the way in which they behave and the way in which they respond to people. But elephants are bright, so the more we treat them with respect, the more they relax and settle down amongst people. They are able to learn what your intentions are and associate them with the way that you behave. And with equal respect, I'm sure James is now at the wonderful home of the spotted hyena.
Here we go. She's linking now. Right, everybody. We've come to my little hyena den, or should I call it my hyena den? I just really like being here. And there's some interesting stuff going on. I think, if I'm not mistaken, I'm going to ask our resident hyena expert. This hyena here is the one they call Ntombela, if I'm not mistaken, maybe a little bit old, possibly the one born last year around February. So that's what I think that is. And then we've got two more adults here, the usual suspects. We'll show you just now. Well, two more adult suspects, and that's the little one that's been living here, and then there are two adults in that hole, where I'm hoping there will be an emergence of little babies at some stage. She keeps looking up and looking inside the hole and making little... Oh, yeah, exactly. I wonder if they're not suckling as we speak. But I cannot get any closer than this, I'm afraid. There's definitely something going on in that hole. If I'm not mistaken, our resident hyena expert reckons that those notched ears are indicative of Ntombela's mother. And so that might be who that is. You can see she's got notched ears on both sides. That presumably is the mother of this other little one here. But who knows? I'm guessing wildly here. I'm really just hoping one day when I arrive here, there's going to be a little black head that is stuck out of the den to say hello to us. I think that will happen eventually. Just need to be patient. I just hope it happens before I go on leave, which will be on Saturday. So I think her backside with the teats on it is probably inside the den, so they might be too little yet to come out, and they'll be suckling, inside. And interestingly, the one that's just stood up, if that's the mother of the little one here, when Corky came around here the other day, she disappeared right inside the other hole. She got such a fright, and Corky gave her such a kind of roasting that she disappeared right inside. The cicadas seem to be in full cry now. They don't mind the heat in the slightest.
You on the break?
And I'm sure that other hyena has probably gone off back to the other den. But again, everything is at peace, and when those cicadas stop, there's very little sound at all. It's almost eerie. I find it absolutely astounding. I've never heard the bush this quiet. Just one dove calling behind us. Proo, proo, proo. That's it, call them out. Come on. She's talking to them. I'm sure she's cleaning them, actually. Oh, this is so frustrating. Come on, bring them out. That's it. That's it. Yes, 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 come on. Come on. It's just a greeting ceremony going on there. Come on. Isn't this fascinating? Frustrating at the same time? Hyenas, as we know, she's just laying down there now. That one is now anal pasting. She's just laying down to suckle them again inside the den. Oh, it's so close, everyone. I think we're days off having them out. She's now gone right into the hole. Maybe she's going to haul one of them out. Come and show us. Wish I knew what they were saying to each other. And now all is quiet again. How very frustrating. Juan, where are the little hyenas?
Inside.
Ah, yes. There you are. Shannon, you say I'm not allowed to go on leave. Shannon, I beg to differ. I beg to differ. I think that you're going to find first of all, Uncle Steph will be taking drives for a little while with Jimmy before the Adonis-like figure of Scott Dyson returns, bronzed from the beaches of Cape Town, and he will cut a far more dashing sight than I behind the seat of the Land Rover or walking in front of you. No one ever accused him of having a bubble butt while he was on a walk. If those of you who are new viewers wondering what that is, I had to look it up myself. I would advise you not to. It'll disturb you for weeks. Thank you, Gillian, Wisconsin. You want to know when I leave and when I'm coming back. I'm leaving on Saturday, at 0500, so I won't be driving Saturday morning. And I think I'm back around the 28th or 29th. I'm not sure exactly. It's so close. I really think we're days away, maybe tonight, but maybe just a few days until these little things come out. I will be so excited. I might whoop for joy, which will of course send them scuttling back in for a couple of weeks. Brian, if I look like I'm about to whoop, just hit me on the back of the head. So we've got 3 minutes left of drive, 2 minutes left of me, 2 minutes for the little cubs to come out. Come on, cubs. I don't think we're going to be lucky, I'm afraid. What have you seen, Brian? Ah, the return of she who I called Bella. No, he who I called Bella. Looks like a he. A slight pinching on the end of that dangly bit. Very lovely hyena, that one. I must say they don't age. They don't age particularly well, these hyenas. They're very gorgeous when they're little, but by the time they get to the age of Corky, they tend to look slightly more, well, weathered. All right, everyone, that's it from me today. We're going to head back home to quench our thirst and put our weary heads to a pillow, perhaps have some bread and water for supper, maybe, if we're lucky, a bit of cheese. Big thank you to Brian. There we go. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you,
That's a very beautiful thumb you have today. It's very green, unlike the bush out here. Tropical thumb. Well done. Big thank you to Kirsty and Geraldine in the final control, and we'll hand you over to Jimmy and Tibbs for the last minute. Bye-bye, and see you tomorrow at 0500 in the dawn. See you then.
Extraordinary African day on our sunset safari. A baking hot end, and it certainly doesn't feel like it's got much cooler. Apparently we've got another scorcher of a day tomorrow. It has been a very interesting experience in terms of animal behavior, and I know that tomorrow we will definitely be checking up on that hippo that we saw around Burfell's Hook. Well, thank you everybody for joining us, and thank you to Tibbs for his wonderful camera work, as well as to Kirsten, Jerry in FC. Have a wonderful day wherever you are in the world, and we will catch you for the sunrise safari tomorrow morning. In the meantime, have a fantastic time. Cheers.